tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. You know, there's this beautiful, this isn't what I was going to talk about tonight, but there's this beautiful poem where it's one of the earliest poems in the Pali Canon. It's from the kind of ancient book of texts. I think it's in the Sutta Nipata, where the I want to just read it. But the Buddha is saying, you know, essentially like I've done my work, I've tended the inner fields, I've done what needed to be done. So rain if you want, O sky. And there's this kind of invitation to the rain gods to rain once we're ready, when we're ready for it, and when we've done our work, we've planted our seeds. Maybe I'll read it at the end, but I don't want to go looking for it right now. But the sky rained all over this place, near and far, up and down the coast. A small handful of folks were tragically washed away, and on the positive and blessing side, as Jason, as you were saying, it's extraordinary to see the reservoirs full, and the rivers full, and the lakes full, and the lagunas full, and the arroyos running, and the drought set back from urgency for a moment. So just blessings in that way. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about urgency tonight, and the quality of continuity. This is building a little bit on talks and conversations we've had the last couple of weeks, coming out of the turn of the Gregorian calendar year into setting intention and determination for the new year, assessing our practice, bringing in good qualities. And I had the idea to learn a new body of chants for those folks who are coming to the 7 o'clock chanting sequence. We've been learning the morning chanting from the Thai forest tradition for some time. This is a beautiful chant that begins with a long series of prayers praising the triple gem of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and then has what it calls a passage to arouse urgency. And the word urgency here, this is a translation of a really important and maybe sometimes hard to understand, not so often taught about in my lineage, but the quality called Saṁvega or Saṁvega. It's S-A-M with a dot V-E-G-A, Saṁvega or Saṁvega. And this is urgency. It's also like heartfelt determination. Saṁvega traditionally is the feeling that you feel after the Buddha or one of the Buddha's disciples or a teacher scares you a bit about the future, especially your future lives. So whenever in the traditional, register, you would hear talks about, the potential future effects of bad actions, how they can land you in very unfortunate states in the future. Hell realms, ghost realms, demonic realms, animal realms that are not blessed with the kind of conditions where one could practice or experience much joy or loving kindness, peace of mind. Saṁvega is the quality of, in a wholesome way, being awoken to the urgency of the matter. And the Zen traditions go far with this quality. When I was in Zen, one of the most kind of distinctive and moving rituals for me was the striking of the han each morning. The kaihan is a block of wood, a couple feet by a couple feet ish, hanging outside the meditation hall, and on it is painted a short poem in the Japanese letters, the characters that says essentially, day and night pass relentlessly. The path of birth and death is, birth and death is the great matter. The moment of death is uncertain. So practice now. Like now is the only time you have to become clear, to become free. And this wooden plaque is struck with a wooden mallet every day at dawn and dusk. And so it marks the time, it marks the end of the morning sitting period where you've sat through the dark of the night and into the coming dawn. The person in charge of whacking the han is supposed to wait to do it until they can see the lines on their palm in the coming dawn light. So it's really a marker of time, and then they would whack it in this kind of slow and then speeding up rhythm, and slowly fast. And it kind of wakes you up, and if you remember what is being struck, it's really supposed to wake you up on all the levels. Over the years, as they would whack the han over and over with this mallet, it would start to wear a hole in it, and it would get deeper and deeper until there's a big kind of worn out crease in the center of this piece of wood, which is literally 4 or 5 inches thick, like a huge slab of wood. And one time we asked, like eventually it's going to break. Like if it breaks, like what happens? And they said, oh, time stops. And we were like, what happens? And they were like, well, if it breaks, you can't keep monastic time. Like the schedule doesn't go on, right? Because you wouldn't be able to hit it in the evening if it broke in the morning. And so as soon as it breaks, the entire schedule is canceled. Everyone goes on to a day off, and you can't restart the practice schedule until a new one is made and formally consecrated. That's how important Saṁvega is. It's the quality of urgency for practice. And so, it's important not to overdo the cultivation of this quality or to ignore it, right? So, middle way, as always, with something like this. Overdoing it would be, in a sense, thinking that we have to push hard in order to have this quality, that I have to try. Overdoing it in a certain way would mean thinking that trying hard or striving, with a kind of force means that I have this quality, right? But those are two different things. Striving is a kind of energy you could bring, which is sometimes helpful and sometimes not. Saṁvega is a feeling, and it's a feeling of urgency. So I could be striving really hard because I'm trying to overcome laziness, which is sometimes what's necessary to do, or I'm trying to overcome, some other hindrance that's dragging me down. But that doesn't mean I have Saṁvega. I could be striving out of shame, or I could be striving based in pride, or based in really wanting to get something, or whatever. That's not Saṁvega. Saṁvega is really it's a purer emotion than those. It's a wholesome emotion. It's not colored by the hindrances, and it's really the wholeheartedness we can bring when our sincerity for practice and for good living and for life and for awakening and for being good people in this world, good sangha, good animals on the planet, when our passion for that and our sincerity for that is really awake and palpable, and we can, and by awake and palpable, like you must be sincere in your practice or you wouldn't come to gatherings like this. Like, it's not like this is overtly fun. I mean, occasionally a decent joke comes out, but that's not really it's not reliable. Haha. But so there is sincerity. You can feel it. Saṁvega is there when that sincerity has enough force to it that you can act based on it. Like, really, that it'll overcome hindrances itself. Saṁvega is a feeling that itself overcomes hindrances. I feel passionate for practice, and so even if I'm sleepy, there's a kind of engagement. I'm here for a reason. I like being here. I want to be here. I want to figure this out. Saṁvega has some qualities of fearlessness. Like, I don't just kind of give up and wilt and crawl away from the cushion as soon as restlessness or anxiety or torpor or doubt come upon me. There's a kind of willingness to bear it, to be with it, to lean in, to be here with this process. So Saṁvega has a quality of leaning in. It's wholehearted. It's a beautiful, wholesome emotion. You don't want to overdo it in the direction of tension, and you don't want to underdo it in the direction of what I might call either premature or misplaced or misattuned acceptance. Maybe excessive premature acceptance. This is a thing that can happen, particularly if we have, if we've stirred a substantial dose of non-dual teachings into our tea. So, I will mostly talk here about how we bring ourselves with a kind of active engagement to practice, and that accepting things as they are is appropriate when we need to come out of denial and really don't know how to engage because there's resistance. We need to accept that this is how things are, and we need to engage with them as they are. But I don't want to suggest that we draw upon teachings of accepting things as they are, if that means that we don't we don't have an engaged approach in relation to our hindrances, in relation to the troubles of the world, in relation to the poisons as they show up in ourselves, our communities, etc. The teaching is not to, when there is ill will or hatred, the terrible, the painful hindrance of hatred in the heart. The teaching is not to just see it and embrace it with acceptance, to love ourselves in our hatred, and then not do anything about it. I think that's really a mistake in practice. The loving ourselves is not a mistake, but the not doing anything about our condition is a mistake. If we, and if I find myself unable to do something about it in the way that I would like, that's all right, right? There's all sorts of things that I'm unable to do, but using a spiritual teaching to convince myself to not try is bypass, spiritual bypass. So underdoing Saṁvega is in a sense deciding that I don't need any urgency, that everything's okay, and therefore doesn't need to be worked on, right? So So without falling off, to one side or the other, neither straining nor giving up. In the middle is a kind of balanced energy for practice, and in the middle can be a kind of balanced engagement, wholehearted engagement. So similar to the instructions in concentration, where we have the energy of connecting with the object or focus, initial focus, vitaka, and sustaining that focus, vichara. So connect and sustain. This is one of the basic meditation instructions. You connect with the breath, and then you keep the attention there, kind of stretching out that contact. This is really a training that works against the tendency of the mind to kind of touch something in a very shallow way and then bounce off. So I connect with the breath, but then I forget and I wander off into thinking about something else. The training is really I connect with the breath and I begin to unlearn the habit of bouncing off to something else. And I stay with it for some time and I stretch out the being with it. So I learn something about continuity of attention. In that way, Saṁvega has, it supports both of those actions, but I think it particularly has a kind of initiatory energy to it. Like it's a strong energy that'll get you to the cushion or get you to the yoga mat or get you to study. It's there to wake you up, right? And in a certain way, you draw upon it to stay awake. You draw on Saṁvega anytime you need to, come out of delusion, come out of the fog of habit, and re-engage. When that works well, I think that the quality of continuity really comes forward. So I was talking with a Sangha member about this earlier today, and talking about how we bring ourselves to practice. Not earlier today, somebody else a couple days ago. How we bring ourselves to practice in ordinary life when we can't be on retreat. And that rather than trying to practice with kind of bursts of intensity, like, my life is a chaotic, unfocused mess until I can finally make it to retreat, or until I can finally make it to the weekend, and then I can really get my mind in order. And it's like I have a retreat coming up in April, and like, oh my God, it's like I'm not going to sit till then, but when I get there, I'm going to really do it with Saṁvega. That is okay if that's what you got. Any amount of determination is okay if that's what you got, but it's going to be more helpful to focus on how I can have a continuity of practice in every day, no matter what that day includes. And so one of our teachers, I think Christina Feldman was the one who said this many, many years ago to my partner on a retreat. She said, every day, this is in ordinary life, every day, make the gesture of stillness. So, and that was very moving to me to hear, a meaningful phrase in the Dharma, make the gesture of stillness. So rather than saying, make sure you meditate at least a few minutes a day, which almost means the same thing, but not quite. Making the gesture of stillness is a way of saying that once we have identified this thing that the whole practice centers around, which is a kind of stopping midstream and waking up to the field of what's here in this very moment. And we do this in meditation. That meditation is kind of the laboratory for this. But the thing we're actually doing doesn't require being in a seated posture, and it doesn't require being there for long. It requires contact with the here and now, and for a few moments, not jumping away. Right? So we have to make contact and we have to stay. And so that means stillness. Stillness doesn't mean for how long, but it does mean that something in the perpetual flow of activity has to stop for a little bit. So you make the gesture of stillness. I also like that it's a gesture, coming at least partly from the dance world. There's a way that, like, oh, I get that. You bring your body into a shape and you just stop. And even if that means that, like, you get home from somewhere and you turn off the car. I'll do this sometimes. Get home, turn off the car, and then rather than just getting out and proceeding, I'll just stop and close my eyes for a moment and let everything stop. And you can really feel it, because I've been moving fast, and now really just make the gesture of stillness. And that it's more helpful to make that gesture every day than to forget about stillness and then try to get it back at some point later. And, the simpler the gesture, the more often you can make it without it interrupting a lot of other things you do. So that becomes really helpful. Continuity is the quality that deepens concentration, and it deepens it more than intensity. So continuity over intensity, if you want a little phrase to carry around. And so every day, a little bit. When I went looking for the word continuity in the suttas to see what the Pali might be, it's not a jargon term, it's kind of a quality, but I found this beautiful text, and it's actually a text on the psychic powers. So if you're curious about the developing of psychic powers, this is part of the instructions for that. And continuity is part of the instruction. So here's how that text goes. And it's got a couple interesting qualities in it around continuity. The mendicants, so monastics is what he's talking to in this text. When the four bases of psychic power are developed and cultivated, they're very fruitful and beneficial. How so? It's when a mendicant develops the basis of psychic power that has immersion due to enthusiasm and active effort. So that's enthusiasm and active effort. These are some of the qualities of Saṁvega. So there's this strong engagement here. The bases of psychic powers are the iddhipadas, and iddhi, iddhi, is powers. And those of you who cross over at all into the yoga world might know the word siddhi. So the same word that starts with an S, that's for sages the siddhas are the sages with psychic powers. So the siddhis are the magical powers. This is, the old, very, very old list of powers that come to one who can concentrate very deeply or is touched by profound grace. Like walking on water, walking through walls, disappearing from one place and appearing in another place, making illusory bodies, becoming very small, very large, flying through the air while seated. Whether you take these to be actual material body miracles that you might do, or things that happen in a kind of lucid dream sort of state, or kind of projected consciousness kinds of states, they're ancient, they're attested to in many different traditions, and certainly have a very strong role in the Buddhist tradition, and they come from concentration. So they are begun here, that you get the basis of them through immersion due to enthusiasm and active effort. And then continuing with the sutta, the Buddha says, they think, my enthusiasm won't be too lax or too tense. There's the middle ground that we were talking about. And it'll be neither constricted internally nor scattered externally. So neither constricted internally nor scattered externally. This is partly not just the kind of effort that we bring, neither too lax nor too tense, but how we direct the attention, right? So there's the internal and external focus, right? External means I'm primarily attending to something coming in through the sense doors. So I'm, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or those things are happening, but I'm attending to them. Attention is with them. I'm actively listening to the frogs, or I'm actively thinking about what to say next. That's a kind of external attention. Or internal attention is like I've dropped into the proprioceptive sense. So I'm really engaged with the shape of my body in space. I'm attending to the posture. Or I've dropped into the neuroceptive sense. I'm engaged in internal sensation. I'm tracking internal sensation, in internal movement, internal energy. Or I'm settling into non-sensation based kinds of internal, kind of sensory seclusion kinds of internal, where I'm ignoring all of the sensory information and I'm settling into other qualities, the quality of loving kindness or the quality of compassion, filling all of space, filling the body, the heart, right? Or settling into the, the immaterial spaces of, just sensing the quality of space or infinite space or this quality of consciousness. All of these are internal directions. So then the attention is neither scattered external nor constricted internal, right? And again, there's a kind of balanced then attention here. And then here's the bit that I want to pull out. And they meditate perceiving continuity. As before, so after. As after, so before. As below, so above. As above, so below. As by day, so by night. As by night, so by day. And so with an open and unenveloped heart, they develop a mind that's full of radiance. So they meditate perceiving continuity. The word for continuity here is pacha puresanyi, where sanyi is sanya, perception. So it's a perception, and the perception is as before, so after. As after, so before. So, the primary teaching that we give around perceiving things is to notice that they change. The main reminder is of impermanence. And so when you're doing vipassana practice, you're trying to see clearly. One of the main things you're trying to see clearly is impermanence. And so you're looking for subtle change. You get a little concentrated. You don't shut off from the world of the senses. And then you notice that attention goes, to the frogs, to a thought, to a sensation, to hearing, to seeing, to a sensation, to a thought, to hearing. It jumps around. And you notice that even when there's calm and some centeredness, attention is still in this very, simple, maybe gentle way, but it's really tracking all these things, right? This is how we can have a sense of being present in the body while I'm present with someone else, while I'm doing an activity, while I'm engaged with my senses with the external world. And this is a wholesome state, right? To be really embodied with the senses in relationship. But when we're doing that, our attention is tracking lots of things. And if we take that open awareness into meditation, what we get is the basis for seeing impermanence, which is one of the deep insights, to really see that moment to moment, everything is changing. When we see that, there's the possibility of letting go, of grasping onto or fixating onto any one of them, and one of the doorways of freedom really opens from there. But this practice of continuity is suggesting something else. And it's suggesting it, remember that it used the word immersion based in continuity. Immersion here means that we are bringing in a state of concentration where I'm choosing a quality. In other words, like when I'm doing concentration practice, I choose something to use as the base, like the breath or loving kindness or the posture of the body or the field of sounds, the act of listening, to use as a basis. But then I perceive what is continuous through that. You can do this with open awareness too. Awareness itself is the thing that's continuous. So you choose something and you hold on to its continuity rather than noticing its changingness. Does that make sense? Yeah? So contrasting vipassana and samatha, essentially. Samatha, the concentration practices, vipassana, the insight practices. Moving through each day, right? We're not on retreat, we're not doing intensive concentration. Doesn't automatically mean that that it's most helpful to be in, vipassana mode, open awareness, perceiving change mode. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not. Other times, there's so much going on in a day. There's so much changing in the external circumstance, and I'm moving around from home to work to different activities, all the different things. It's actually helpful, rather than trying to settle into noticing that those things are changing and having an insight about that, to actually get more grounded, to cultivate more continuity rather than perceiving discontinuity. And so through the day, you could choose a quality, like proprioception, for instance, like the shape of the body, or very lightly the quality of like being present with the open field of the senses, like awareness is present with the body, with the breath. Something very simple that you can do while you're doing anything else. You can do it while you're doing emails. You can do it while you're with your kid. You can do it while you're driving, whatever you do. And you cultivate continuity with that quality. And so how the sutta describes it is, you actually choose that which doesn't change. And so you're perceiving as before, so after, right? Rather than noticing, oh, the quality of my attention fluctuated slightly. That would be the sort of vipassana style noticing. I'm not going to worry about that. Instead, I'm going to just go noticing, 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 right? Or body, body, body. I'm just going to stay with the body, even though the body right now is different than the body right now, right? It's like, oh, body with arms out, body with arms in. I'm ignoring that. I'm just staying with the general sense of the body, so that no matter what I do as I flow through the day, I have this like touchstone that can sail through. And so it says, it goes on as before, after, below, above, by day, by night. And ultimately continuity, I was told this on retreat ages ago, and I laughed a little bit inside because it sounded so absurd, but it turns out to actually be possible. I was given the instruction to be mindful right up to the moment of falling asleep. So take your continuity of mindfulness all the way to the moment of falling asleep. See if you can notice which breath you fall asleep on, the in-breath or the out-breath, right? Super difficult to do. You can do it. It can be done, but it's challenging. And then start immediately upon waking. See if you can notice the time that you're awake before your eyes open. See if you can notice whether you wake up on an in-breath or an out-breath. And then going further than that, and I only know a few people who can do this, and mostly on long retreat, so don't give yourself grief over it. But the practice can become being mindful and attentive through the sleeping time, so through day and night, through sleeping, where awareness becomes aware of nothingness, essentially aware of not taking in any sensory input. So you can be aware during deep sleep. The very beginnings of this are to practice lucid dreaming and being aware in your dreams and being aware of sleeping and waking. But the pathway can go all the way. So that's what the Buddha is talking about here with the psychic powers. But it really means, in an accessible way, I think what it points to is just, can we engage with the flow of our days in a way that's less broken up, less fractured. And a different way of saying this is, with less forgetting, right? More mindfulness means less forgetting. So less moments where I was really just lost in something, and then I had to remember and come back to alertness, come back to like, oh, here I am, less times of really forgetting the body and having to come back to it. And so the last line of this little sequence here is, and so with an open and unenveloped heart, they develop a mind that's full of radiance. The radiance brings to mind this word used to define, as part of the definition of the natural state of the mind in Dzogchen practice, the mind being luminous. And that there's something about, there's this whole field where continuity and the concentration that comes from it awakens a kind of clarity, is sort of what it's like, but it has a little more force to it, and it has this quality of like the awareness or the mind, the heart mind, being kind of luminous or radiant, right? And so one of the earliest poems in the Pali Canon says, "Luminous is this mind, brightly shining, but it is covered or veiled by the defilements, the hindrances. Luminous is this mind, brightly shining, and it is unveiled, unencumbered by the hindrances, the defilements." So it's possible to unveil the luminosity of the mind or the heart with this kind of, gentle, persistent, heartfelt, passionate without constriction energy, and then bringing that energy to continuity of wakefulness, really, through the whole day, in a way that's balanced in our effort, not trying to do something that our conditions aren't set up to do. I will stay with every single breath for the whole day, but also not giving up on the possibility of being continuously, present with the body, with the feelings, with unfolding sensory life throughout the day. So, with an open and unenveloped heart, they develop a mind that's full of radiance. All right, so a bit on Saṁvega and continuity. Thanks for listening. Pleasure.